Hi, I'm Jeremy. Welcome to part 2 of our video series where we go from Ontario to PEI. We're starting this video off at the farthest point away from home. We're not heading straight home from here, but we are going to start at this point because it's about 2,200 kilometers away from our destination. So we're going to charge up here, head back to the hotel for a few days, and then we're going to take off from there. Island, and it's pretty neat. They got two different types of chargers here. They're both Tesla chargers. One side is a J1772 and this side is a Tesla charger. What's really neat is they actually give you 80 amps of service here. So if you have a Model S with twin chargers, you'll be able to get quite the charge out of here. Okay, we're back from North Cape and we're about to head back to Ontario. This is the last part of our trip. We're gonna head straight home from here, no hotel stops on the way. I believe we have just over 1,800 kilometers to drive. Well, let's go. Okay, we're on our way, nothing to plan, just enter it into the map and it'll sort out the superchargers along the way. We'll make a couple of edits along the way and we gotta stop in Amherst. Let's go. Nothing to see here, just headed to our favorite restaurant in Moncton as we go through again. If you're ever in Moncton, come check out Halo Donuts. This place is amazing and they got a couple different chains around town. We're at the Salisbury, New Brunswick Tesla Supercharger at the Irving Big Stop. We'll be here for about 20 minutes and then we're off to Woodstock, New Brunswick for the next. Okay, we're at our second stop at Woodstock, New Brunswick on our way back to Ontario. There is a car charging over at the 50 kilowatt, so once again, we're gonna leave it open for other people and use the Tesla superchargers. Much faster this way anyways. There we go, pulling 147 kilowatts. That's why Tesla superchargers are so awesome. We'll only be here for about 25 minutes and then we're on our way again. Oh, we're just driving along in New Brunswick here. Looks like a beautiful sunny day. But wait, there's more. here in Rivière-du-Loup charging up. We actually went to a Petro-Canada station. We usually avoid these because they don't work, but we have been here before. We know that the second unit at this station actually works. Don't go to the first station in Rivière-du-Loup, try out the second one. Okay, I think that's pretty good. There's lots of charging points here in Quebec. Let's keep on going.
On the left is the Appalachian Mountain.
Ah, I see my wife has joined our YouTube video. This is a hill. This is what amazing things you get to see while on a road trip in a Tesla.
There's a truck.
Oh my god. This is the most amazing road trip ever. You get to see a hill and a truck. Stay tuned, everyone.
Wait. If you look to the right, there's another hill.
Oh. No, that's trees. You're wrong.
You missed it.
You're wrong. Okay, there's a house.
There's a house. There's a hill. Right there.
No, the viewers can't see it. No. Okay. Oh, but there's a motel and restaurant over there.
And there's another hill.
And a bridge.
There's a tree.
Okay, and this is the comedy portion of the video.
To your left, you will
Oh my
see
god.
a hill.
Oh, I missed the hill. Oh.
To your left, you will see a hill. Yeah.
Look to the right.
You will see
To the right, to the
others.
right.
To the right beyond the
Okay,
trees.
to the right, to the right.
To the right, to the right.
Oh, a hill. And some sunshine.
It's a beautiful hill.
Brought to you by Livewire Review.
You're not crazy at all.
Okay, we're here at the Charge Point Charger in Lévis, Quebec. Decided to use this, save about 10 bucks, and you get about 125 kilowatts out of these machines when no one else is here. So I moved over from this one over to this one here. These stations are supposed to tie together and give you up to 125 kilowatts. At this state of charge, I would expect to see something that high, but it looks like there might be an issue with one of the modules because we're only getting about 73 kilowatts. Can't hear any fans or any cooling going on. But this will still be cheaper, so I'm going to stick with it. Okay, it looks like I was wrong as a combination of both. The car has been pulling over 70 kilowatts this whole time, so it looks like the car just pulls less when you're using a CCS adapter. Keep that in mind sometimes when you go to these charge point connectors. Okay, and we're over 70%. We're going to have more than 20% at our next stop, so we're going to stop this session right now. As you can see, only cost us about $11 once all said and done. Okay, we're at our next stop. We're in Brossard in Quebec. We pulled into an IGA and we're at another charge point charger. Same as the last station, putting out about 70 kilowatts. So I guess that's what you can expect from these charge point stations. There's nothing wrong with them. That's just what the car is requesting. I forgot to take a video when we left Brossard, but we charged up to 85% and our next charging stop is in Gananoque. Well, we're at the Mallory Town en route charger. I had my doubts about this one, but it's actually working. Let's check it out. This is what I expect from a CCS adapter, pulling 126 kilowatts, no problem. So clearly the charge points just don't put out as much as I expected. Well, I think it's time for a bathroom break. Let's go inside. Okay, Mallory Town IV charger, attempt number 2. Once again, pulling 126 kilowatts, that's what I expect. Let's hope it stays on this time. Okay, it's pretty disappointing. These chargers do drop down to 30 kilowatts, just like it says on PlugShare. So we're going to stop the charge and head back to Gananoque. Okay, we're at the Gananoque supercharger now because the Mallory Town en route charger was not working, which I kind of expected because it wasn't working last year. But that is kind of sad that they haven't fixed it in a full year. So here we are at the Tesla supercharger, and as usual, all you do is you plug it in and it works right away. And this one's amazing. This is a 250 kilowatt supercharger. We're pulling 232 kilowatts. No problem. We won't be here long, that's for sure. Okay, we're almost done here. That took almost no time at all. We're going to stop at the supercharger in Port Hope as soon as this says about 20%. See you there. We're at what I hope is our last stop. We're in Port Hope, Ontario, just so we can get to the last leg home. Well, let's see you home. Usually when you come to a Tesla supercharger, the one on the end is set up for trailers. Now you can pull straight in with a trailer and charge a Tesla here. You charge a truck here. But unfortunately this spot isn't as good as most of them because it's not a pull-through spot. So the trailer will still be hanging out at the end. But at least the design thought is there when they come up with this. Most other situations are a lot better. And I just checked the navigation screen. This is our last stop on the way home. We should end up home with about 10, 15, 20%. Well, I just checked the map. We've traveled 1,572 kilometers so far. And so far, nothing has gone wrong. This is excellent. We're almost home. We just got this one last stop. Okay, we just pulled in the driveway at 8:40 a.m. and we left the hotel at about 9:30 yesterday, which would be about 8:30 yesterday. So about 24 hours, but we did do a couple of stops along the way. And let's look at this. I didn't reset it right away, so we're just over 4,520 kilometers traveled, and we averaged 16.4 kilowatt hours per 100. Now that's actually kind of interesting because last year when we did this trip, we did 16.6 kilowatt hours per 100 with the thing on the hitch behind us. So that's pretty good efficiency. Well, we're coming to the end of part 2 of our trip to Prince Edward Island. This is the part I was telling you about. I'm going to talk about the numbers. Got a nice souvenir when I was down in PEI, and I just wanted to talk about how much it cost to actually do this trip. So I broke down every part of the trip. The first place we went to was an Ivy Level 3 DC charging station. That was $14.86, and that averaged about 23.6 cents per kilowatt hour. I think that was actually the best rate we saw through the whole trip. On a Flow Level 3 charger at a 100 kilowatt station, we did $12.14, and it was 32.7 cents per kilowatt hour to charge at that station, so also pretty good. And then we did some Flow Level 2 charging on this trip. That added up to about 26 cents per kilowatt hour. So Level 2 charging was not as cheap as I thought it was. It ranged anywhere from $1.50, $2 to $3 an hour. When you're in Prince Edward Island, it was about $3 an hour to charge on a Level 2 Flow charging station, so it wasn't the best price. And we went to a couple of charge point stations, Level 3. What was interesting about these stations is they didn't actually charge very fast. They only charged about 72 to 78 kilowatt hours, despite the fact that these stations could put out 125. And we know from the Ivy charging stations and the Electrify Canada stations that this will pull 126 kilowatts or more using the CCS adapter. So I'm not sure why it's throttled at those stations, but keep that in mind if you do use one of those charge point stations. It will be limited slightly with the CCS adapter on this car. And we also charged some ChargePoint Level 2 chargers. That was about 35 cents per kilowatt hour, so that was a little higher than expected. And then we did Tesla superchargers. Superchargers I added up, and then I did the math, and it added up to 46 cents per kilowatt hour. I find that kind of funny because when you go into the app, it actually states 46 cents per kilowatt hour, and my math came up at 0.4584. So it was incredibly accurate for what you pay at a supercharger. So you can expect that across the board. Despite the charging curve and the tiered pricing and everything like that, as long as the car is preconditioned, you should spend about 46 cents per kilowatt hour there. Total paid for this trip. We didn't pay for all the charging we did, but we paid for 522 kilowatt hours of energy on this trip. And we actually used 807 kilowatt hours for the whole trip. So what we did is we actually stopped at some Tesla destination chargers and we got some free charges along the way. There was also a hotel in Rivière du Loup where the charging overnight was free. And we started off with a little bit of home charging. That was about $7.15 before we started the trip. So all in all, we used 807 kilowatt hours and the total cost for our trip was $206.49. Now I did the math here. If I had done the rest of the charging, the free charging at the visitor center, it would have been $115. If I had done it on a Flow 50 kilowatt charger, it would have been $92. And if I had done it at a supercharger station, it would have been $105.80. So I'm rounding it off. I got about $100 worth of free charging on this trip due to the destination chargers that you find at the national parks in Canada, also at the Anne of Green Gables Museum in Cavendish. That was pretty cool. So we used that a couple of times rather than going to the visitor center and spending $3 an hour. It was a nice perk because all the Parks Canada national parks, most of them have destination chargers and they're 48 amp chargers. In fact, some of the ones that we went to, like Brackley Beach for instance, and actually even at the Anne of Green Gables Center, they were 80 amp charge stations. So if you happen to have a Tesla Model S with twin chargers, you could pull 80 amps at a destination charger at the national parks in Canada. I think that's pretty cool. So another couple of things with math that I wanted to cover. We've got 230 kilowatt hours totally free. It was at the Rivière du Loup Hotel. And we also got a whole bunch at the destination chargers, which we already discussed. And if I figure that out, if we had done this entire trip charging at home, which obviously you can't do that, it's about 13 cents per kilowatt hour. I charge only off peak, but what I did is I took my entire power bill and I divided what I spend over the number of kilowatt hours we got. I know it's not really what the car took, but I'm still adding the destination fees in there. So I rounded it off at about 13 cents per kilowatt hours when you spend it at home, and that's Canadian, of course. So if I did 807 kilowatt hours at home, it'd be $104.91 Canadian or $79 US for 4,520 kilometers, or in American, that's 2,807 miles. So if you were to drive a hybrid car that got 5 liters per 100 kilometers, and there's only a couple out there that can do that. That'd be like the Ioniq or the Prius can do 5 liters per 100 kilometers on a long trip like this. That would have been $8.13 per 100 at $1.62 per liter. That's what it's going for in Canada in the maritime provinces at the moment. So if you had driven a hybrid, it would have cost $367.70 or $279 US. So if you live in a province or a state that is mostly coal powered, you might actually find it more economical to drive something like a Hyundai Ioniq or a Prius. But when you get into the hybrid SUVs, I know from experience they only get down to about 8 liters per 100, and that's the best they can get. Let's say like a RAV4 hybrid. In the real world is not as good as what's on paper. That would cost $604.59 or $459 US. And an SUV that uses 12 liters per 100, like the MDX that we used to have, would have been $906.89 or $689 US. And what's really interesting about this is the efficiency we got on this trip. We did a similar trip last year to Cape Breton and to Halifax and to PEI. We covered about 5,770 kilometers if memory serves me right. On that trip, we used 16.6 kilowatt hours per 100. That's pretty good efficiency because we actually were carrying something on the back. We had this carrier with a bag on the hitch on the back of this car. So that way it would be behind the car, so the efficiency would be better. And I calculated it only makes a 1% difference if you put your cargo on the back of the car rather than on the roof. If it's on the roof, it's really going to affect the aerodynamics. And I've heard losses of anywhere from 15 to 30% using a rooftop carrier. So if you can, carry your luggage on the back. It really does work well because we've now done this trip twice. And this year we got 16.4 kilowatt hours per 100. Last year 16.6, this year 16.4. When you're going up and down the mountains a bit, you're going to get up to about 19.8 is what I saw. So only a 1% difference if you carry the cargo on the back of the car. That's with 4 people in the car, all our luggage, camping gear and everything, and it only makes a 1% difference. I think that's pretty neat. So if we had just used superchargers for this trip, which I think is a cost we should really focus on here, if we did 16.4 kilowatt hours per 100 on this trip, and we times it by 46 cents per kilowatt hour, because it's pretty standard like that, it would have cost $341 Canadian or $259 US. And last year's trip, at the 5,770 kilometers we went, that would have been $440.60 or $334 US. So that's kind of interesting. That gives me my range figures now. So I did a degraded with the buffers removed bit of math here, and I figure we have about 75 kilowatt hours that we could use. Let's just assume that the battery's degraded about 10% and is a couple of years old. It's only about a year and a half old now, so I probably only lost 5%, but I figured 75 kilowatt hours. That would give me 100% to zero without using the buffer below zero, a range of 457 kilometers or 284 miles. And if we had done the same math at 16.6, last year's trip with the cargo on the back, 451 kilometer range, 100% to 0%, or 280 miles of range, 1% difference. I think that's pretty neat. So the most efficient way you can carry stuff across the country is to carry it behind the car, because the efficiency with the aerodynamics, it just seems to work. And if you were to use the new Model 3, here in Canada, we're getting the one made in China now. They've made a switch so that all the American-made cars go to the US, and that probably has to do with the American rebate. So here we're getting the made in China cars. I have no problem with that. They have good build quality, but they do come with a different battery in them. So they start with 75 kilowatt hours instead of 82. So if I did a degraded figure for that, this trip would have given me a range of 411.5 kilometers, 100% to zero on the newest Model 3 that is just coming out, and 406.6 kilometers at 16.6. So American figures, 255 or 252 miles, but that's only on the newer car with the slightly smaller battery. So that's pretty neat. So just a couple thoughts before I go. Basically, when you go on one of these road trips, you're not going to use the 100% to 0% between charging stations. You're probably going to travel anywhere between 200, 300 kilometers between stops, because the fastest way to travel in these cars is to go anywhere from 10 to 20% up to around 70%. You get the fastest charging curve doing that way, regardless of whether you go to a 100 kilowatt station or you go to a supercharger. You're gonna find it's the fastest way to travel. Try and make it so that your next destination is about 20% on the GPS, and then if it drops below that to 10%, you got a really good buffer. You got 20% worth of buffer, and then you even have the buffer below zero. So you're not gonna run into any trouble. I found with the GPS on this car, it is super duper accurate. There was only one leg in New Brunswick where I saw it dip about 5%, and that was, I think, going from Rivière-du-Loup to the Woodstock, New Brunswick area. It was very, very, very accurate for every other part of the trip. That one was only off by about 4 or 5%. So we popped into the supercharger, and I think we had 14% when we got to one of the stops, which was perfect because we filled up at somewhere like 146 kilowatts. It is just incredible charging speed. Each stop on this trip was no more than 25 minutes. We averaged anywhere from 20 minutes to 25 minutes at every stop, and we would go from like 10 to 70% most times. Sometimes we went up to 80 if we wanted to go on a longer leg, but then we actually had to make an extra stop to go to the bathroom, because when you have a drink at one of these stops, you gotta stop again. The kids aren't gonna make it through the trip. So the longest parts of this trip that we took were about 287 to 300 kilometers. And those are long trips between chargers. It is really nice to actually stop, I'd say around every 200, 212 kilometers. That was much more comfortable than doing the 300 kilometer stretches. And that's my final thoughts on that. You can use these hubcaps or not. You can leave them off. You only lose about 3%. The amount of time you spend at superchargers, it's so negligible, you really don't have to worry about it. So if you put the roof bars on here, you're gonna see about a 3% drop. If you take these aero covers off, you're gonna see about a 3% drop. If you put the cargo carrier on the back, you're gonna have about a 1% drop. But if you put the rooftop carrier on, and you have one of those big rooftop boxes, you're gonna look at about a 15 to 30% drop in your range. So that's something you're gonna wanna consider on this trip. The car takes a lot of cargo. You'll see in the pictures here, I had the frunk totally loaded up. We had the trunk totally loaded up. We had the hats in the back window, a couple of games in the back seats, and just everything fits really nicely in this car. Last year for the trip, we had to go camping in Cape Breton, so we had the cargo box on the back, full of all the camping gear with the sleeping bags, the tent, the air mattresses, and the stove, everything we needed to go camping. And of course, we always had our trusty Tesla mobile connector, but on this trip we didn't have to use it at all. We completely used the public network, whether it was free charging at the destination chargers, or if it was any level 2 charger I saw, basically I would pull in and charge at any one of those. ABCs, always be charging. If there's a spot available, you might as well take it when you're on a road trip. That way you save yourself the headache in the future. So on the subject of charging, I just wanted to cover a couple more topics here. If you're going to travel across Canada, you're going to want to get the CCS adapter. And if your car is one of the older ones, I would highly suggest you go and get the module that allows your car to charge with the CCS adapter. This pulls over 126 kilowatts. It really does get you out of a jam. For example, if you're going to travel the East Coast and you plan on going to Cape Breton, you actually cannot travel with a Tesla to Cape Breton because it's a little too far. When we went last year, there were 2 superchargers on the way up there. And I don't mean superchargers, I mean Flow 50 kilowatt DC fast chargers. So the one in Bedeck, I had been checking all year up until that point to make sure it was working. Well, guess what? On our trip, it wasn't working. Luckily, this car can travel really far on a charge, so it was no issue getting all the way up to North Sydney and Cape Breton. But without this adapter, I would not have been able to charge at the charger in North Sydney. And when we got there, there was somebody else there. There are only 2 fast chargers that lead up to North Sydney, and they've added 2 more. I believe there's one at a dealership now and one off on another side of Cape Breton. But basically, there's still only 2 that lead you up into Cape Breton. So keep that in mind. You're going to need one of these if you want to get up to Cape Breton. So another point on traveling across Canada with an electric car, you're going to find that Southern Ontario is very well serviced. Going across Quebec, it's a charging wonderland. There are DC fast chargers everywhere. You'll find 100 kilowatt stations, 50 kilowatt stations, Tesla superchargers. You'll find everything under the sun getting across Quebec. Going across New Brunswick, there is enough DC fast chargers to get across the province, but most of them are 50 kilowatt stations. Where you find Tesla superchargers, you're going to find 8 stalls at I'm pretty sure every single stop. There are 8 stalls for Tesla superchargers. Even going into Nova Scotia, going down to Enfield, which leads into Halifax. But the 50 kilowatt stations, there's usually only one 50 kilowatt station at every stop. They have good spacing in between them, but there are a couple of situations where that's going to be an issue because there's only one charger at each stop. And I'll show a clip here. We were at the Woodstock, New Brunswick charger on the way back, and an F-150 Lightning pulled in. Now, when I pulled in here, I saw a Kona Electric charging at the 50 kilowatt station. So once again, we left it free and we went to the Tesla supercharger. We were pulling 147 kilowatts, so we were doing just fine. We were only there for 20 minutes. But that Kona, as you know, we also have a 2019 Kona EV, but we haven't taken it across to the East Coast yet because it would take twice as long at each stop. This car will do 20 to 25 minutes between stops. The Kona will probably average about 50 minutes per stop, which is doable. I could do that. I have no problem traveling across this country in the Kona. 50 minutes is enough time to get a bite to eat and, go to the bathroom and do anything else you need to do between your stops. It's actually a nice rest. But when an F-150 Lightning pulls up, that truck takes 2 hours to charge. Now, the Kona was already charging, so the Lightning couldn't charge. I don't know what happened with that, but imagine that we had the Kona. The other Kona was already there. We'd be waiting in line. So that'd be 50 minutes for the first Kona, 50 minutes for our Kona, and then that F-150 Lightning would also have to be there for 2 hours. So rural runs in the East Coast in an F-150 Lightning are still difficult. If you're in a built-up area like Moncton, around Halifax, if you're in Quebec anywhere, Southern Ontario, it's not an issue. There are a lot of fast chargers that an F-150 Lightning can charge up at. But if you're in the rural areas where there's only one 50 kilowatt charger, say every 100 to 150 kilometers, it's going to be harder, especially if you're towing a trailer or you have a big load. An F-150 Lightning has a very large battery. Speaking of that, Hummers, all the big trucks, 200 kilowatt hour batteries, 50 kilowatt chargers are just not going to cut it. Okay, that brings us to the end of this episode. This was part 2 of our trip to Prince Edward Island. We've taken this car all over the place in the Maritimes. Last year, we covered 5,770 kilometers. This year, we did 4,520 kilometers or 2,807 miles. This car is amazing on road trips. It's smooth, it's quiet, it's excellent in the rain, especially if you have the Michelin tires. You'll find autopilot is excellent. There was one time where there was one phantom braking on the trip. That is because one line was painted in the middle of the road. Just keep a watch out for that if you're using autopilot. Other than that, this car is fantastic on road trips. We've covered over 10,000 kilometers in road trips in this car. Not to mention all the day trips that we've taken, going out to, say, Guelph, Waterloo, anything like that, down to Toronto. We're gonna take this to Tobermory next. Should be interesting. Now, if you enjoyed what you saw, like and subscribe, leave a comment down below. I wanna know what you think. Do you have any questions about our trip? And thanks for watching.